Look, I hope everyone who's watching this video has first of all will judge me favorably, as is befitting for any kosher Jew, certainly a rabbi, um, and has some measure of intelligence and depth of perception that we're able to hear out what I'm trying to say. Obviously, my blood is boiling, as I'm sure everyone else's is, after the terror attack. Yes, let's say it like it was. Extreme Islamic terror attack that took place in New York yesterday. And it's our home state, our home city. God forbid, it could have been any one of us or our children, chas v'sholem. So, it's not a time to be silent, especially as elections are coming next week. And there is something that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with HaKadosh Baruch Hu's help, we could do something about this. I'll preface, in order to soften the blow of the extreme title of the heading of this video presentation. Of course, obviously, no one thinks, I'm a Nazi. So please, just hear me out. But I'll open up with a story that happened with my Rebbe, Rav Moshe Shapiro of Zecher Tzaddik V'Kodesh Livracha. He once told us in Shir, and I was privileged to be a part of a select group that learned with him in a close chabura for 7.5 years. So he once told us that he has observed throughout Jewish history that after the Jewish people go through some type of terrible setbacks and terrible destructive periods, HaKadosh Baruch Hu compensates us, and immediately following that is a period of tremendous spiritual and academic, Torah learning explosion in the positive sense. After the big tragedy of Churban Bayis Sheni, the destruction of the Second Temple. So in the generations coming after that, we had the Mishnah and the Talmud, codified. Those huge intellectual achievements, to say the least. And following which, another two examples that he gave us was after the terrible expulsion from Spain in 1492. Immediately after that, there was a tremendous spiritual and academic renaissance. Came the Beis Yosef, with the Shulchan Aruch, and the Ramak and the Arizal, clarifying and publicizing the principles of Kabbalah. And again, another example that he gave us was after the terrible pogroms of Tach V'Tat with Chalmanitsky and Yamach Shemo. So after that, the generation following, we got people of the likes of the Shach and the Taz, and all that tremendous research and spiritual development, spiritual renaissance happens. And when HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings a tzara, he compensates us double and triple afterwards. It's always a time of tremendous exponential, growth and spiritual growth and intellectual development, and a time of tremendous intellectual attainments and developments. So he looked around the room, gave us all a piercing look, and he said, Va'anachnu, and us, Haya Shoah, there was the Holocaust. Anachnu adayin hamaka, we are still in it. We're still in it. We're not out of it yet. We're still part of the plague, part of the disaster of the Shoah. So at the time, I was a very young man at the time, and I took it to mean that he was very critical about the mediocrity of of the yeshiva world. Whatever. It's nothing like the intensity and the intellectual developments and achievements of the generations before the Holocaust. And I took it just at that. I didn't realize how deep he was going with this. That the Holocaust we're not over it yet. We're not over it yet. It's not yet the Renaissance that came after the Holocaust. We're still in it. I failed to see the full gravity and the full depth of the message he was trying to impart to us. So it took, I'm embarrassed to say how many years later it is since that time, and today it finally clicked. It finally, I understood what he was saying, at least in part, and it is so shocking. And it's shocking that to the point that people probably would not want to deal with it, and people who technically might find themselves on the same side of the religious and political spectrum that I identify on may just tell me to shut up because this is just too shocking. But it's the truth and has to be said before it's too late. Right? Hitler won. In what sense? That he came with this whole bogus story of racism. A whole bogus story, right? Are the Jewish people a race? I ask you all. Well, everyone knows the famous quote that I always say over from Rav Sadia Gaon. Ein amenu uma ela b'toraso. What makes us a nation is our Torah. Now, we spoke about this many times. The national fabric that holds us together is that we're an ideological nation. Ashkenazi Jews may be a closer DNA match to the Europeans that they have lived amongst and absorbed converts from. And it wouldn't shock me one bit if Ashkenazi Jews are a closer DNA match to European Gentiles, and if Sephardic Jews are a closer DNA match to, people from the Eastern, Middle East, those types of countries. Wouldn't shock me. I'm not saying that they are, but it wouldn't shock me one bit, right? Because Judaism was never about race. It's about the Torah. So, without even getting so complicated, here's a simple halacha I'll bet everyone knows. Every Orthodox Jew knows. And some Orthodox Jews who have been infected by the liberal virus may have a problem with this. Right? And that is like this. You take a scenario of a person who pure Jewish stock, all the way back to Avraham Avinu, let's say, straight down, no converts, direct descendant of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, all through the generations until this day, 3,000 years plus of solid Jewish stock, and then Nebuch, this boy who's 100% Jewish stock, all the way back to Avraham Avinu, marries a shiksa, right? All his kids are not Jewish, even though it's, they're 99.9999% genetically Jewish, right? They might have more Jewish genes than any, halachic Jew. Whereas, take an example like this, right? That even since Matan Torah, the day after Matan Torah, I'm saying Matan Torah for a reason, right? Because it's when the Torah kicked in, right? And the Torah decided what's a Jew and what's not. So the day after Matan Torah, a Jew married a Jewish girl married a Shegetz, married a Goy, and they had a daughter who married a Goy, who 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 had a daughter who married a Goy, all the way down 3,000 years, solid. Right, that the Jewish genealogy has been totally diluted for 3,000 years straight. But it's a daughter after a daughter after a daughter after a daughter after a daughter, all the time just mating with Goyim. Right? And now this daughter after daughter after daughter has kids who are genetically are 0.00000% Jewish. Those kids are Jewish. Why? Because the Torah says so. The Torah declared them Jewish. The halacha, the Jewish law. Right? Judaism had never anything to do with racism, with race. It always had to do with the Torah. And someone is Jewish because the halacha, the Jewish law says they're Jewish. And they're not Jewish because Jewish law says they're not Jewish. Came Hitler and made it an issue of race. Right? And I'm sure everyone's heard this. And it's still going on in Israel until this day, probably in other circles also, but in Israel it's a hot topic. Adayom hazeh. right? You know, Hitler was willing to kill a person who was Jewish by patrilineal descent. Patrilineal descent, right? So a Nazi killed that type of person because the Nazis viewed him as Jewish, right? You're not going to call them a Jew. You're not going to give them a citizenship in the state of Israel and the law of return. They were killed. A person like them was killed for being Jewish by Hitler. Right? You know, it hits some heartstrings, doesn't it? Right? But so what? You know, one of the great Rebbes said, stupidity could be worse than the greatest evil. Right? It hits heartstrings of a person of shallow mind. As a good friend of mine, Rabbi Penny Dunner of the Beverly Hills Shul, said once to such a secular Israeli that wanted to extend the law of return, that anyone a Jewish, you know, by Nazi definitions, right? Anyone who's Jewish by Nazi definitions should be allowed, should be considered a Jew, and should be allowed citizenship in the state of Israel. So Penny Dunner told her, I think we should give the honor of deciding what's Judaism and who are Jews to Jews, not to Nazis. Right? And I have to say, Penny, you hit the nail on the head. You said it so well. But I'm going to say it in a more radical way. Right? We've made Hitler Rabbi Hitler. Rabbi Hitler. He'll decide who's Jewish. Right? And in that way, God, you know, unfortunately, he's had a victory. In the sense that now the world, think about this, it's shocking, but and people might want to tell me to shut up because they can't bear listening to it, but it's the truth. Hear this out. Hear this out. Hitler is now the yardstick of morality for the whole world, for the whole liberal world. Right? He created something called racism, right? And made it Jews an issue of race, right? Which Jews are not an issue of race. Jews are the nation of the Torah, God's chosen, and we're chosen because we accepted His Torah, right? Or because He chose us, He gifted us His Torah. We're the nation of Torah. It's got nothing to do with race. Right? A convert who converts, you know, and joins us, you know, is just as Jewish as anybody else. Right? Matter of fact, the Rambam writes something very interesting. You should know. He has a letter to Rav Ovadia Hager. Right? There was a man by the name of Ovadia who was a convert, and the Rambam wrote him an extensive letter, you know, talking about all the different halachas that a ger has to know. And he said a ger should not be in any way disheartened. Right, that he's not of Jewish stock. This is the Rambam talking. And this Igeris to Rabbeinu Ovadia Hager. Says a Jew should not, a ger rather, should not in any way be disheartened that he's not from old Jewish stock. Right? In a certain way, he's higher than the average Jew because he's directly related to Avraham Avinu. In the parsha we just read, Avraham Avinu got the status of Av Hamon Goyim, the father of all nations. And Ramchal explains, as do others, that that's how the mechanism of which conversion works. Avraham Avinu can receive grafts. He is the father of all nations, and you know, and he could receive grafts from any nation, and that's why a ger calls himself Ben Avram, son of Avram. So he says, you're a son of Avram Avinu. A lot of Jews, you know, they may have come from Avram Avinu originally, but a lot of Pashta people, a lot of simple people in between. You're directly a son of Avram Avinu. It's amazing. Right? It's a Rambam. Right? So now we've been fooled by Hitler that Judaism is an issue of race. Right? Hitler has defined Judaism for us. He's Rabbi Hitler now. Right? God forbid. But he's defined it for the whole world. The whole world really adopted his moral yardstick. They just use it in reverse. As Hitler now just set the weights and measures, the yardstick of morality. It's an issue of race, and that's what social justice is based on, is that certain races have been persecuted, and now they have to be compensated, even though the people we're compensating aren't the people that were persecuted. They're not. They're just from the same race. Right? I've read frightening things that they're talking about how white people just have to quit their jobs. In liberal circles, saying white people just quit their jobs and just give them away to black people. Black people just have free tuition, right? Because of slavery. Now, I can understand if any one of these black people themselves were slaves or grew up in a slave family, right? Just because they're from the same race, because they're the same skin color. Maybe some of them are immigrated from a different country and never were slaves. Their ancestors were never slaves. Right? It's ridiculous. It's an issue of race. Right? Not only that, if it's an issue of compensating people, anyone who's a descendant of slaves, do DNA testing. I will wager there are millions and millions of white people walking the planet, right, who were the descendants of black people who were slaves. Right? No, it's an issue of race. It's the black race, black supremacy, white privilege. That means the whole world has really adopted Hitler's method of thinking, Hitler's measures. Just they apply them in the reverse. But Hitler now has become the ultimate moral authority in the sense that anything that sounds like Hitler is bad. Anything that could be shown is the reverse of Hitler is good. Right? But you're on Hitler's playing field. You're working with race. So it's only Nazism, right, if you persecute these races, right? And it's not Nazism if you're the ones that Hitler persecuted or any white supremacist persecutes, if you're supporting them and bolstering them and giving them stuff for free. And the same thing regarding, the queers. It's right because Hitler was against them. That means Hitler's really the moral authority, just in reverse. Everything's being measured up against Hitler, being measured up against Nazism. That's frightening, right? A person who is really, really against Hitler, right? See if he doesn't understand, they should be adopting the Torah, right? Which is God's revealed truth. But at least, if you're not going to adopt the Torah, understand that going still with racial measures and measuring things by race, right? You're on Hitler's playing field, right? Just you're on the other side of the field, but he set the playing field. He set the rules of the game. Right? A person who's really, really against Hitler says race is irrelevant. It's something that Hitler made up. Right? It's all about what are your ideas, your ideology, your values. What do you do? What do you contribute to society? How do you help society? How do you hurt society? What good do you do? What bad do you do? It should be an issue of ideology, values, what you do, not an issue of skin color or DNA that you have. Right now, I was so shocked and appalled after yesterday's terror attack that Bill the Bolshevik, right, just can't get out of his mouth, this was radical Islamic terrorism. Now, I don't care about the DNA of the terrorist. I honestly don't care what stock he's from. Right? It's not an issue of race. I don't care. I don't know. I have no idea. I have no idea what his stock is. It's his ideology. He ascribes to an ideology of terrorism. But because that sounds like racism, because many of these people are descendants of Ishmael, Ismaphobia, right, so now we can't say that anymore. Right? And you because it could be vaguely connected to an issue of race, right? Can't talk anymore. Can't identify the enemy. Right? And the enemy is the enemy not because of their DNA. It's because of their ideology that they want to kill us and they want to destroy the Western world. It's the ideology. It's got nothing to do with their DNA. I'm not looking for people to do DNA testing. Right? It's like, what do they believe? Where are their values? What do they want to do? All right, but now we're not allowed to talk about that. Right? It's called racial profiling, even though it's got nothing to do with race. And that's what's happening, throughout this country. The whole social justice movement is racism. It has adopted Hitler's ideology, his mental yardsticks, his moral yardsticks, just applying it in reverse. And it's called to be Antifa. It's anti-fascist because even though you're working with the same terms and the same values, because you're applying it in the reverse. The whole values are sheker. The values are wrong. The whole values are wrong. Right? And that's Hitler's victory. Right? He sold the whole world on these fake values That people think, yes, let's go with Hitler's values, just apply them in the reverse way that Hitler applied it. That's a major victory for him. That now he set the dialogue. He set the values that you work with. He sets the intellectual and moral yardsticks that we measure issues with. That's crazy. That's the greatest victory for Hitler. And right now, the pendulum is swinging, against the Torah, right? And against Am Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael. Zionism is racism. That's right. Zionism is racism by Hitler's yardsticks. That's correct. All right. This is the terrible cultural that's going on there, and there's really, there's no difference between Antifa and Nazism. It's the same. It's the same yardsticks. Just the application is different, right? And that's a tremendous victory to Hitler. That he should be the moral yardstick that humanity uses, but not humanity. It's the liberals and the globalists that want to take over humanity. And Hanukkah is coming, and Hanukkah was all about a cultural war, right? And this is it. Hanukkah is coming early this year. Hanukkah this year is on November 7th, right? It's, in a sense, we have to go out there, and we have to try to fight back because this type of the liberal agenda, which is in effect a victory for Hitler, it's only a matter of time where it's going to come. It's going to come against us, even though we were the biggest victims of Hitler. Makes no difference. They're going to say the Bible is racism. They're saying it already, right? That the Chumash, the Torah, it's all racism. It's anti-goy, it's anti-this, it's anti-gay, right? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's only a matter of time, when they'll outlaw Shechita and they'll outlaw Bris Milah. Right? We have to stop it now. And not only that, just to protect our city, right? We have to seal our borders, right? Stop worrying about being perceived as racist. Racism doesn't exist. It's a stupidity that Hitler made up. It's all about values and actions. And we are allowed to protect ourselves from anyone that has an ideology and intent to hurt us and destroy us. We are perfectly allowed to seal our borders and to filter who comes in here, right? If it's an issue of protecting us and our children. So it's an issue of our safety, but in the long run, and that long run is not too far away, it's an issue of protecting our values and our Torah, because it's only a matter of time that they come for us, and they come for our Chumash, right? Hashem Yazor, right? Go out there on November 7th, and yes, I say this openly, don't look for the Jewish names on the ballot. Who cares? Be'ezar Hashem will get rid of Chuck Schumer and Dianna Feinstein. B'mheira b'yameinu, right? Like we said, Judaism is not a race. It's not an ethnicity. Judaism is about the values of HaKadosh Baruch Hu as expressed in the Bible and Talmud. Go out there and vote for those who hold up those values. Including that are the values of self-defense and protecting our families, our cities, our borders. Go out there, vote for Nicole, for Mayor of New York, and vote for, all the Republican conservative people on the ballots of all the different issues, right? And this is our Hanukkah. This is our Hanukkah of going back and fighting back, because this cultural war will ultimately lead to the worst bloodshed we've ever seen, right? Believe me, it's only a matter of time before the liberals come for the Orthodox Jews. I'm telling you, right? It's time. Let's do it now before it's too late. This is our personal Hanukkah, right? So some people will say, but there's New York State, very, very liberal state. Well, that's the message of Hanukkah. Giborim biyad chalashim, rabim biyad ma'atim. Right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu on Hanukkah put the mighty in the hands of the weak and put the many in the hands of the few. Hashem will help, right? At least if we go out and we choose, and when you do these, we call it elections in Ivrit, bechirot, choices. Right? It's ubacharta b'chaim. You do it when you're voting for the Republican conservative candidate, right? and voting against the constitutional reform that's up there, because no good will come from it. You're actually doing a mitzvah of being ubacharta b'chaim, choosing life, choosing the life of the Torah. You're choosing HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's your way of fighting back. Rebbe Shem should help. Everyone should go out, register to vote, and go out and vote, and not for the Jewish names, for the people with the values that are reflected by Judaism. No matter what their family name is, no matter what their skin color is, you vote for the Republicans, the conservatives. Those are the ones who right now we have to close ranks with, together with our president, because God chose him, right, and put him in the position that he's in. We have to close ranks and stand up against the liberal onslaught, which is the continuation of Nazism. Go out there and vote on November 7th and get rid of the Democrats and put the Republicans and conservatives in their proper place, and maybe by trickle-down effect, it will have a reverberating effect, and it will be l'sakin olam b'malchus shakai v'chol elilim karosia karesim.